Hello, everyone, and welcome back for another episode of the Outdoor Adventure Series podcast. The Outdoor Adventure Series celebrates individuals and families, businesses, and organizations that seek out and promote the exploration, stewardship, conservation, access, and enjoyment of the outdoors. Our guest today is Jonathan Farber. Jonathan is an author, outdoor writer, and founder of the Urban Outsiders. The Urban Outsiders' mission is to connect nature-curious urbanites to the outdoors so that they can live healthier and more balanced lives. Jonathan, it's a pleasure to have you on the Outdoor Adventure Series podcast. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Howard.
Fantastic. And for our listeners, in the spirit of full disclosure, I had the great pleasure to meet Jonathan for the first time down in Gulf Shores, Alabama last month, where we both attended the Outdoor Writers Association of America's annual conference. So our environs are a little bit different today. I'm in the desert, you're in the big city, a little different than Gulf Shores, Jonathan, but again, welcome. And where are you, by the way? Let's share that with our listeners.
Right now, I am in Toronto, Ontario, and I am just mourning the end of summer, which happened to me officially yesterday.
Officially yesterday. You know,
yes.
It's like the weather just all of a sudden flips a switch right after our Labor Day and it becomes cold and rainy and dreary. Is that what happened to you?
I was fishing for muskie yesterday, and it was the first day that I had to wear all of my rain gear and pack myself full of every layer I could find in my truck because I was unprepared for some reason. And so that really did mark the change of season for me.
All right. Now, I've heard muskie are a very tough fish to catch.
They're known as the fish of 10,000 casts. And I can tell you there'll be people who call it the fish of 1 million casts. And yet others might just get lucky while fishing bass and end up with a big problem on their hands that they weren't expecting and a great story. But they are a lifelong pursuit.
All right. Now, have you had the pleasure and the good fortune of getting a muskie on your hook?
I have had excellent fortune. I've been blessed with muskie several times. My record right now is about 45 plus inches.
Oh my!
Yeah, it's a big fish. And yesterday I caught one of my smallest, which was 30 plus inches. And I have to say, I'm ashamed of it, but I was a little bit let down, which is a terrible.
For the people, it's a 1 million catch, and here you're disappointed in a 30-inch muskie
Absolutely.
that you did land. Okay,
I know so many people whose dream it is their goal. They'll be self-actualized when they catch a muskie, and when you get to the point where you're specific, you're looking at inches, and that's a fortunate place to get, and it's also a bit of a curse.
Okay. One last question, and I guess we eventually have to get back on the topic at hand, is where do you go to catch a muskie?
So one of the best muskie lakes in the world is Lake St. Clair, which is a Canadian. You might remember it's borders Detroit.
It's right on it. I think it's like somewhere up here. Yeah, it's here.
That's where
right
it
there.
Is. It's on the border of Canada and the U.S.
Right.
Detroit is across the river from I can't even remember
Windsor.
the Canadian city. Windsor.
I'm from Detroit.
Oh,
I know things. I'm from Detroit.
Yes, there you go. So you come from the mecca of muskie fishing,
okay.
And I know you've done a lot of it, Howard. I can tell right away. This is a muskie fisherman I'm seeing right here.
You're going to make me actually share and be vulnerable for this moment, but I have never, and I share this with everybody that's an angler, fisherman, person. I've never been fishing.
Oh, Howard, why did we were together? I was fishing almost every day while I was down there. We should have gone fishing.
If I had known you were going to be down there, I would have made plans. And our good friend David never said anything. If I had known, I mean, for our listeners, Jonathan accosted me at the bar as I'm walking back to my room. Hey, Howard, how are you? And it's like, what the heck are you? But but the rest is history, as they say. Yeah, I had never been fishing, and I want to go. I if I could do it again, I would love to have spent a couple more days and gone on some of those fishing adventures because I speak to like yourself or David, Dieter Hamper, some of the folks are catching brook trout and cutthroats and this and that. And it's like, I want to experience that someday.
Howard, you will experience it if by El Paso next year
Yes.
you haven't experienced it, then I'm not going to let that pass. That's our deadline, but
Right.
hopefully we'll get to it before then.
I hope so. Now, there is an event that's being sponsored by the OWAA in Johnson City, Tennessee. It's next July. I'm hoping to get to.
I am planning on it as well.
All right. So maybe we could even do it there as well. I'll
Sounds
start
good.
off with a small little fish. But yeah, so I will be in your capable hands in terms of the instruction and the mentoring, the guidance.
Just for your audience sake, if you don't know what a muskie is, imagine the freshwater equivalent of a long fish like a torpedo that's full of teeth, and they get up over 60 inches. So it's the apex predator of the freshwaters around here.
And I was going to ask you, what does the muskie look like? So thank you for sharing that, because I know I've seen some photos, and it's like you don't want to be on the leading edge of one of those.
Yeah. We use like a long needle nosed pliers and fishing nets, and we rarely handle the fish, not only for its own safety, but also for our own. Saves
Right.
you a trip to the hospital.
Yeah, that too. And this is strictly catch and release. You've got the
Absolutely.
glory, and then you put it back.
Absolutely. Yeah. These by the time a sizable muskie is at the end of my line, it's been in the water for, it could be like 20 plus years.
Mm.
They are much more successful in their element than I am as a human. If I was the equivalent of one of, after everything they have to go through to survive long enough to get that big, we're talking about Olympic athletes.
Wow.
And Howard, Lake St. Clair, just to bring us back,
Yes.
if you still want to know, has one of the highest density populations of muskie anywhere in the world. And they're big, and that's
I
what
did
makes
not know
it.
that. Wow.
Yeah.
I've learned something, and I feel like if my mom, may she rest in peace, was still alive, I'd have to call her and tell her what I learned today, because that's what she'd ask me every day when I went to school.
And maybe she'd go out there to Lake St. Clair with her rod and see how she would see how fair her luck treated her.
There you go. There you go. So let's chat a little bit more about you and post, or actually pre-muskie adventure, this weekend and the changing of the seasons. For our listeners, share a little bit about your background prior to the writing and the outdoor adventure. And we're going to get into the urban outsiders, but
Sure.
for our listeners, just share a little bit about your background.
Sure. So I'm a lifelong outdoorsman. My father brought me into the outdoors in so many different ways, fishing primarily, but a lot of other sports as well. And I've always had a very urban interest as well. And so I did a degree in the arts in university, specifically in theater performance, believe it or not. And from there, when I realized that being an actor was the low man on the totem pole, since you had to wait around for work and you had no control, I ended up going to film school, and I produced a feature film starring Billy D. Williams.
Oh,
Yeah. And then after that, I decided that I actually wanted to make money. So I left the movie business and went into television. And for 20 years, 20 plus years, almost 30 years, I produced, closer to 30, yeah, produced and directed about 140 hours of television a year, which is an insane amount of television a year. And I was fortunate to win awards, and it was a successful career. But it wasn't enough for me. Even when I was at my happiest in the film industry, in the television industry, I had a lot of other interests, and I think it could be my ADHD that inspired me to take little breaks, short hiatuses within my television career, and go explore other things. Among them, marketing was I don't know why, but it was a real interest to me. And I think it had to do with the psychology of influencing people's decisions, changing people's minds about ideas, not just products, but changing the way we think and believe and feel. And so I would often hop back and forth between working at a think tank or working for a marketing firm or an ad agency and then back into television. And then at some point, the world of television in Toronto turned into marketing anyway. You couldn't do anything unless you were selling a product or you had sponsorship in place. Product synergy is what it became known.
Hmm.
And at that point, I thought, I can't do this anymore. So I wanted to tell stories. I didn't want to be telling the dairy farmer's story or whatever if it wasn't engaging to me, just to sell more eggs. So I decided to explore the other passions that were really in the world of hobby for me. And I always believed that if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. And I was very naive when I believed that. I managed to really kill a lot of passions that way. However, I always loved cycling, and I got to the point where I was racing bicycles. Yeah, not well. And this was an amateur level. I never won a single race. I was happy when I finished in the middle or near the back third.
I would be happy if I finished.
Well, believe me, there were there were lots of times I was pulled off a course because I was getting lapped. And that when I spent so much time trying to figure out why do I work harder than everyone else and end up finishing at the back of the pack. And that led me into really looking at the human engine. So after doing a number of physiology courses, getting certificates, I became a cycling coach, left the
Oh,
racing to those who were born to it, and opened up Bespoke Athletics, which was a boutique testing and training facility for cyclists. And I also wrote for Canadian Cycling Magazine, and I was still writing, which was making me happy, and I was very immersed in the sport and helping people engage, not just the people that were at a world level that were competing for world championships and national championships, which I did coach as well, but also regular people who just were struggling and wanted to keep up with their friends on a group ride on the weekend. And the democratization of the tools, making things more accessible, has always been a vital part of my experience in the outdoors, in whatever it is. I like to break down walls and I like to invite everybody in, especially if it was like a private party.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
I can start to see some of the hooks into what you're doing today,
Hmm.
especially the premise and the mission around the urban outsiders. I do have one quick question.
Sure thing.
In addition to yourself, do you have brothers and sisters?
I have a twin brother and I have two sisters.
Oh my God, there's another one of you out there.
Don't
Are you exactly
don't worry,
alike?
Howard. He's nothing like me. He's
Okay,
a gastroenterologist. He's the responsible one. He was known as the good twin
the good
because we're
twin.
twins.
Okay. So when you're, and I love the fact early on in this, when we started this conversation, you mentioned that your father enjoyed being outdoors and he would take you outdoors on these adventures, especially with the fishing. That's a common theme in many of the interviews I have, especially the folks who are like yourself, outdoor enthusiasts. I love when I hear, yeah, my grandfather took me out, my aunt, my uncle, my father took me out. And what was it like to go out wherever you were going to go with your father and just kind of engage with him in these outdoor activities? What was that like?
Well, Howard, you can read the book coming soon,
Coming
but
soon.
I'll coming soon. But in fact, I had a very odd upbringing. My father sadly was over 500 pounds.
Oh, wow.
Take a moment to process this.
That's big guy.
Yes. So while he loved the outdoors, I think he loved nature as much as anybody that I've ever met.
Mm,
He was limited, unfortunately, physically.
okay.
And my brother and I were very physically able young people. We were really molded in a way that my father kind of wanted to relive or reform his story and make sure that we were not limited in the way that he became limited
Okay.
in his life. So fishing was the one. There was a lot of stuff that we did. We did a lot of stuff outdoors where he would be immobile. He would be on a chaise or sitting down, and
Okay.
he would direct us. And he really taught us in a hands-on way how to fell trees, how to start fire, how to build fires, how to survive in the outdoors.
Okay.
And as far as fishing went, it was an ideal activity because he could sit at the back of the boat and steer the boat, be at the tiller,
Right.
and we could all fish together. And when we were in a boat seated, he was not limited in any way as far as his physical abilities were concerned. It was a real leveling field. And in
Okay.
fact, he excelled because he had talent and he had knowledge, which he passed on to us. I will tell you, it was very competitive. I was born into tournament fishing, and the field of opponents were my brother and my father. And I do love, like, I'm a very competitive person by nature, and I love that kind of fishing. And I still have a hard time turning it down. When I'm fishing with my peers, I get in their head. It's like it's a psychological game as much as it is a battle
Ah,
to catch. But it was the most ideal way to be brought up because we were wild kids. We were kids that the door was open, and I'm sure you've heard this a million times. Yeah, you don't come home till the stars are out.
right. Yeah.
So fishing, I when I had kids, I have 2 sons. Now one of them is 21 and one of them is 18. Their childhood was like a very light version of my own, but I insisted that I instill the love of fishing into them and a love of the outdoors. And they're still in their own ways connected to the outdoors. So
Okay.
I'm really proud of that.
Okay. So, and I appreciate you sharing the story. I mean, the 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 full
Oh,
the
that
full
we haven't
story.
scratched the surface,
Yeah,
Howard. Come on.
of which we are going to have to wait for the book to come out.
Yeah.
Is there a working title for this book
The
now,
book,
or
the working title is It's Not How Deep You Fish, It's How You Wiggle the Worm.
okay?
And it is a narrative nonfiction that is so basically it's a memoir with a lot of humor because that's the only way I can look back on my life to date.
I can't imagine anything else
A-
that humor in there.
And again, it's not a how to.
O-
It is really, and this aligns with a lot of my feelings around the outdoors. It's really about the why. Why do we fish? Why do we do anything in nature? And I think like nature has the power to heal us, to save us. I'm not saying anything original right now, which I'm aware of, but there's a reason why we hear about the power of nature so often. And I think one little difference that maybe I add to it is outdoor activity rather than just sitting down in a forest and forest bathing or Shinrin-yoku or whatever we call it. That's a very advanced pursuit to just be in nature.
Mhm.
I personally can't just be anywhere. I've never been able to meditate.
You sounds
Um,
like you just have to be in nature, but you have to be doing in nature.
exactly. You
Okay.
put a fly rod into my hand, I won't talk for 6 hours. And I know that you find that shocking.
I okay, I'm gonna remember that one. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I again, sitting in a tree stand or stalking, like these, they're moving meditations,
Yeah,
but nature is the cathedral,
right.
and it's where I connect to a higher source and myself and
Okay.
others.
Okay. So I'm curious now, the you are the founder of the Urban Outsiders. Now, I went to school. I've heard the word urban before, and in a lot of cases, with some exceptions, urban is concrete. It's buildings and houses, brick houses. What is the premise behind the Urban Outsiders?
Well, when I was new on Instagram, I'd be posting a lot of snapshots of my life, which often involved either shooting bows or hunting, fishing, hiking, backpacking. And I would often get messages from people that I knew or even people that I didn't know well, who talked about, wow, that's so amazing. You fly fish. Oh, I've always wanted to do that. And then I would follow up with, well, why don't you just do it? And then I hear all of the reasons, all of the I'm not going to say excuses because frankly, they are legitimate reasons why people don't do things.
Mhm.
And the funny thing is, all of those legitimate reasons have an answer, have a workaround. And you just need somebody to open that door for you, to take those obstacles away. So I was pretty surprised. I was always aware of the fact that there was an equity and inclusion problem with the outdoors.
Mm.
And as a presenting as a white man, who now has a white beard, so I am the, like, prototype, the absolute prototype of outdoorsman. Throw on my lumberjacket and, like, that's what we think of when we think outdoorsman. However, there was a whole generation. I think I was in one of the last generations of outdoor wild kids,
Mm.
being a Gen X member and over 50 now. And there were a lot. I always took for granted that everybody just had the same skills or the same access that I did. So if they are not doing it, it's just because they don't want to do it. It's not in their interest. But what I found out, thanks to Instagram and all those people talking to me, was that they did want to do it. Deep down, they saw a river runs through it when they were young and had the fantasies about being in a river and being Brad Pitt fly casting with Robert Redford or whatever. They imagined themselves throwing axes and chopping down a tree and putting on a backpack and walking alone into the wild and thriving, not just surviving. And I didn't know that that was beyond people's abilities or interest, or rather, or permission. They actually felt, there's a lot of people that actually feel not invited into the outdoors. Obviously, the BIPOC community is the focus of that equity and inclusion conversation, and for good reason, because all they think about is there's a bunch of white guys there, and it's not really made for me. I'm not nobody like nobody's really inviting me out there. There's no space for me. And my focus with the Urban Outsiders, was really to look at a lot of the millennials at the time who are working in these amazing, like, digital factories, or whoever there's no money obstacle for them. So you take that out of the way. And again, this is not a white, black, whatever thing. I'm just saying, financially, there's a lot of people who find it challenging to do stuff in the outdoors because sometimes our equipment is expensive, or
Yeah.
there's no way to get there that's cheap and easy. But if that's not an obstacle for you, then I was looking at, well, what else are the obstacles? And the fact is, not everybody had a dad who took them fishing, or an uncle, or an aunt, or a mother, grandmother, whatever it is. If you didn't grow up in the outdoors, then it can be a mysterious and forbidding place. It can seem scary. I've heard so many fears. Oh, I'll get lost. I'll get eaten by a bear. I'll drown. I'll whatever. And these are not unfounded fears. I'm not going to call them, like, justified,
Mhm.
because very few people actually do run into that kind of trouble. But you get there when you're exceeding your abilities or your knowledge, right? If you're not doing that, then there's a lot of safe ways to engage in the outdoors and do the things that you've really wanted to do. You don't jump to Z. You got to hit A, B, C, D, all the letters along the way.
So, how is the Urban Outsiders helping to start kids who, for whatever reason, never thought that they could be included, or perhaps didn't have the funds to
Right.
partake, or the transportation to get to where the opportunity was? How are you helping the kids in the urban setting today?
So I want to be clear about something. There's a lot of ways to be involved in that conversation. There's a lot of ways to take action on equity and inclusion. I'm a white guy, and I don't have, there are certain communities, they're not looking for me to be that person for them. As much as I try, I do, as far as the urban part goes, you can take a digital kind of studio and you'll see people from all different cultures, all different colors, all different races, whatever we say, whatever those things that differentiate us physically and nationally, whatever, there's a mindset there where they connect as urban people. They share a love of good food, they of culture, a popular culture. So they're not necessarily kind of identifying themselves as just I am black, I'm white, I'm Asian, I am this, I'm that. It's I'm urban and I'm sophisticated. I have certain tastes that are different, whatever. And it becomes somewhat colorblind at that point. There's always obviously, again, this is a white perspective, but the fact is I'm more than just white, but I don't I have to go with how I present. And I know that it's a very challenging and very diverse group of people with diverse needs and challenges. How so I'm only looking at a small group to start, which is the people that identify as being urbanites.
Right.
And so while I do children's programs with the ranch up here in Canada, we have like every year we have about 500 or 600 people come out, their families. So we'll also have activities for kids that are we're teaching them to fish, running fishing derbies. We're providing all of the equipment, same with archery, all kinds of other outdoor activities. You might find it funny, but I run a cowboy program, cowboy skills, where I teach knife throwing, axe throwing, archery, bull and roping.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So again, these are not things that you typically will use in the outdoors. If you don't work on a ranch, you're not roping. But again, like I said, sometimes it's the activities that people want to do that help bring them into the outdoors, right? We're not saying come look at a tree with us. We're saying come do something fun and crazy that you've always wanted to do. It's going to happen outdoors. And there's an organic process that happens when you're in the outdoors, even if you're not focused on, hey, I'm in the outdoors, it's having its effect. It's sinking its claws into you in a really healthy way. So when you ask me what I'm doing for kids, yes, I do some programming for kids and whatever, but what I'm really looking at is what is the conversation beyond just if I was just taking out black kids or Jewish kids or Asian kids. I feel like there's people to do that, and they're the people who are within that community because they're the most trusted, the safest people. If one of the if a member of that community doesn't feel safe to do it with me, then they want to be with somebody that looks like them. So that's great. That's the first step. And I take people who consider themselves urbanites. And to be clear, the word urban can also refer to like urban as in the black population in the urban music or whatever. I'm talking about urbanites, not that everybody's not included, but I do want to make that clear. So they're typically professionals, and I help bring them into the outdoors through activities, like fly fishing. Like I run a weekend that we jokingly call, and let me be specific. This is a joke. We call it. Oh, great! Now I'm blanking on it. It's
Because you're getting old. It's
yeah. It's called Man Camp.
man camp.
And the joke about Man Camp is that while we're teaching axe throwing, knife throwing, fly fishing, all of the camping, all the things that we've traditionally associated with men, often there's as many women, if not more women, who are interested and their competence level. I'm not seeing a difference. Sometimes women tend to be a better marksman. When I ran it just for men, all the women, all the wives and girlfriends were like, hey, we want to do this too. I never set out to do it just for men, but the irony of the title was lost on some people.
Mhm.
But it's because the people that participated were not traditionally men in the sense that we jokingly imagine the old school guy with the axe on his shoulder going into the
Sure.
woods.
When we were at the conference down in Gulf Shores, I remember over the course of the 3 days of the conference, a number of presentations. One, there was access. Corey Lee was in a wheelchair. There was a
Mhm.
woman speaking about she and her husband got into, I want
Yeah,
to say it was car camping or something like that, or teardrop trailers, but they would bring people together and do these weekend excursions,
that was
uh,
overlanding.
overlanding.
Yeah.
And then there was a woman, in fact, and I had chatted with her. She is in Chicago. She has a nonprofit there to teach kids how to get out of their comfort zone,
Yeah.
walk out the door, walk away from the neighborhood in a very safe and accessible
Yeah.
manner, but to experience things that are not they were not traditionally used to experiencing.
Yeah.
And I know there was a couple others and talking about their experiences of being, a couple black guys who were out, fishing in the fishing hole and being yelled to get away. This is my fishing hole, which I still think is pretty amazing because,
Yeah.
but with you this, so what I'm sensing then is the urban outsiders. It's really for, you're going to correct me if I'm wrong,
Yeah.
for folks who perhaps they are urbanites. They live in Toronto, they live in Chicago, where I was
Mhm.
from, New York City, and they're just not used to getting perhaps out of their comfort zone and experiencing nature and the outdoors and the benefit it has to offer. So you're
Mhm.
providing that vehicle for them to come away to a very comfortable place, safe place, and
Mhm.
you're going to experience what it means to get away from your urban environment.
You did a great job, Howard. You actually did a good job in summarizing that. I will say you were talking about Sonia Staples from Staples and Tents. She was the one who presented about her overlanding group
Right.
from Staples and Tents. Sonia and I have been in contact since the event because um, my group, while I wasn't looking at color or gender or sexuality, anything like that, I did not have any limits other than age. I did have a, I think it was an 18 to 55-year-old age limit. Depending on when you become of age to drink, I would bring in alcohol sponsors as part of, great wine, great whiskey, chef, whatever, because this is what the Urbanites expect. But I did find that the equity and inclusion conversation didn't leave a lot of room for people that didn't identify as one of the people that were kind of in that group, to voice their kind of concerns or to get into the outdoors because they didn't want to. They felt guilty about like, well, I'm white, so even though I don't feel invited and I don't feel safe, I should probably just shut my mouth. And then instead of going to the woods, go camping, I'll just go to LA for my vacation or New York or whatever, not to a national park. And so my idea when I heard Sonia and I saw her group pictures of all of this, it was a very homogenous group of black faces in all doing the same stuff that I love, thinking like, how come I wasn't there? And the fact is, I don't know that I would feel like I belong there. I would feel like it's not for me. And that's exactly the problem we're trying to avoid with equity and inclusion. So Sonia and I had a conversation, and we both feel the very same way. It's okay to get into the outdoors through the equity and inclusion movement. If you feel more comfortable with your own community, by all means, go on your trip with somebody that you feel safe with, or learn from them. But once you learn those skills, or you're no longer a very, very beginner and you're ready for something more intermediate, then you are no longer a beginner. And you have, again, everybody has the right to the outdoors, but to take that next step, wouldn't it be great if you didn't just stay within your community, but you joined something that had people from a bunch of different communities? The experience would be so much richer
Mhm.
because now the outdoors, which we always talk about the connection, connecting to ourselves and others, now we're really looking at things that are common among us. We're both beginner fly fisher folks. We both haven't we both caught like our first trout. And it's not about you're black, I'm white, or you're a man, I'm a woman, or you're gay or I'm straight. It's not about that. We're outdoors people. We're
Mhm.
humans, and the outdoor is for humans. So let's focus on what connects us, our interests, our passions,
Mhm.
our humanity, rather than what separates us, which is our color, our religion, our gender, and sexuality, and so forth.
Okay. So I've got a question then. For this movement to build and to break down those barriers further so it becomes just a natural desire for me to find others who want to enjoy this pursuit, whether it's overlanding, fly fishing, going out on Lake St. Clair and going after a muskie.
Hmm.
What are some necessary steps that you feel today have to happen for this idea that I can feel comfortable being out there and enjoying myself and crafting and creating a bigger, better community?
Right. Okay. So I feel that all of these groups that have an audience that speak to their very specific niche, they're all graduating people, right? So if your first reason to be a part of those communities is because you don't know anything, you don't feel safe. Once you build a little bit of proficiency, I would like to see those organizations, hence my conversation with Sonia, start talking to each other and let's cross pollinate. Let's have groups get together. Let's have this group of predominantly Black overlanders join a group of, open it up to another community's group of overlanders, or all of the communities of overlanders that are part of this conversation, not just because they're members of the BIPOC community, but let's bring in those people that we might not consider part of the equity and inclusion conversation, that might present as a white man or whatever, who is just as new and feels just has their own obstacles, which surprisingly, when Sonia spoke, it really hit home for me how common the experience of being new and thinking like, I don't want to sleep in a tent. I don't want to get eaten alive by bugs. I don't like bugs. All of these things, it doesn't matter who you are, from what community you come from. None of us really like bugs. We all want to be comfortable. Let's talk as a group about what we share and what we can do together. And I loved her presentation because of its the universal experience in what she spoke about, even though that wasn't the point.
Mm.
The point was, here's just what's happening with this one little community that doesn't feel included. And yet I feel like she was talking to the whole world.
I feel like an organization like yours, and when you define this equity and inclusion, it's the thread of being an urbanite and having this desire to get out and explore and experience that in some ways is the connective thread between all these groups.
Hmm.
And if you could
Absolutely.
bring that
Yeah.
together, then you're building something a lot greater than some of the parts.
Right. I feel like there's a universality. There's an open inclusion already in my group,
Mhm,
but to be in my group, in a way, you also, to start, have to have limited skills or experience, right? So
mhm,
that's somebody who's a lifetime a time outdoors person isn't gonna be interested or want to associate with us. They want to just do what they do. But um I really do feel like it's and I don't want this in any way to sound like, wow, we're not part of the equity and inclusion group, because there's a good reason why all those communities are part of that. They are absolutely right.
mhm.
All I'm suggesting is, like, think about, let's all open ourselves to the possibilities that as humans, regardless of what we look at like, we are all part of that conversation. At some point, the first time you do something is the first time you do it. And I think that once you get past that, we need to open up our minds, open up the space, and really let nature do its job, which is bring us together and break down barriers that we ourselves are just putting on our, on society and our expectations.
Very good. Now, I'm curious, as you have been embarking on this journey, what advice would you give to our listeners about how you can break down these barriers and go into adventure without being open to learn and experience, and
Right.
not have to have these trappings of this is not my community, this is not my religion, this is not my cause, but just be out there to experience. What advice would you give to our
Uh,
listeners?
yeah. So the advice that I would give to people who don't necessarily who are intimidated, who have a desire, they're nature curious, as I call them,
Mhm.
to experience the outdoors or an outdoor activity, but feel limited because of the being part of a certain group. I would say, like, cover your mirror for a second. Imagine that you don't know what you look like, and just go with what is your desire, what is your want, and why. And then I want you to recognize that you are invited. If I'm the white, like, looking representative of the outdoors, listen to these words right now. You are invited. You are wanted, because the more we care for the outdoors, the more it cares for us. Nature cares for us, and we're all living in the on the earth. That's a common thread. There's no off. We don't have a Saturn, like a Saturn outpost where we're all going to go when, we eventually wreck this planet. So if we can recognize our humanity and that we're all the same, then you need to have the courage to take that step. And again, let me be clear. If you need to access it through your own community at first to feel safe, by all means. But at that point, we have now the usefulness of those organizations taking the same people out to do different things all the time. I don't believe that to be so helpful anymore.
Mhm.
I think it's, and this may be controversial, but I think it's part of the problem at that point, because what you're doing is you're ghettoizing an activity or a community or whatever. I think you need to be brought in. However you come in, I love the idea of as many organizations as possible, provided that they're not hateful or whatever, that they're supportive. Come in, find your group, and if you can't find your organization, then consider the possibility that you may call up a fly fishing store and say, I want to fly fish. I don't know how. What would you suggest? And they'll say, well, you know what? At 7 o'clock every Monday night, we have a learn to fly fish. Why don't you come in? That person doesn't know what you look like. They don't know your name.
Mhm.
There's nothing that they can tell. But what they do know is, here's somebody that's interested in something we love. They're one of us.
It's interesting you say that, and I love that example because here in Las Vegas, we have the Las Vegas Astronomical Society, and on their Facebook group, I mean, I don't have a telescope. My love is dark sky photography, the Milky Way, and what I love to occasionally see on the messaging is I'm coming to Las Vegas. And I've always with my family, I want to take them outside to see the stars. Or when do you guys do your monthly get together so we can look at the planets or what other celestial event is going to take place? And this is it's a telescope. That's it. So anybody can be interested in this particular hobby, and it's open for everybody at all different levels. And I
Mhm.
love that, and I love the community that you are building, with the urban outsiders. And because I think you're right. It's what we need because if we stay within our own homogenous group, we're nurturing that, and in fact, I think we're actually constricting it because we're not
Mhm.
growing, expanding, and learning. So I love that message. Jonathan, it's been a pleasure to have you on the Outdoor Adventure Series podcast. And by the way, I will take you up on your offer to help me um, overcome that lack of fishing experience, and whether it's in Johnson City or in El Paso, Texas next year. But more importantly, if our listeners would like to learn more about you and your work, where are the best places for them to go?
Right now, I'm in the process of, because the book is almost finished, and I hope it will be out within a year from now. I'm kind of changing my social media and all, but I'm leaving the Urban Outsiders, even in its skeleton form right now, up. Urban Outsiders on Instagram, so at Urban Outsiders, and you can DM me. I am happy to have a conversation, as you know, Howard, with anyone who is truly interested, because it's my passion. And I do feel like together we can make the world better, as cheesy as it sounds. And that includes you and I, Howard, and you're doing it all the time. So thank you. So please contact me if you have a group, if you're running a group, whatever you want, I will help you.
I love it. I love it. And Jonathan is in one of the most beautiful places in the world, Toronto, and Ontario is gorgeous. And if you're even lucky, he may take you out muskie fishing on Lake St. Clair. Who knows? Who knows? Jonathan, it's been a pleasure to have you on the Outdoor Adventure Series podcast. I'm so grateful that you accosted me at the Dragonfly Bar down in the lodge in Gulf State Park. The day before the conference started.
Yeah.
And it was a pleasure just getting to know you at the conference. And again, thanks for spending time with us today.
Oh, thanks for having me. And I look forward to our next conversation, Howard.
Sounds like a plan. Listen, stay in the line. We're going to do a real quick close and you and I can have a final chat. Okay.
Perfect.
All right. Okay, folks, we've just been chatting with Jonathan Farber. Wonderful, wonderful human being. He's an author, outdoor writer, and founder of the Urban Outsiders. And if you couldn't feel the passion coming through the airways, well, guess what? It was there, and it was definitely the cup is runneth over, as I think people do say that. I don't know, but really, wonderful passion for helping individuals who want to get out of their comfort zone, get out of their urban setting, and really look at the world as your oyster. So much to enjoy and to experience. And Jonathan, through his work with the Urban Outsiders, is helping to make that happen, and really appreciate just the journey that he is on and helping others to really to experience living life to the fullest, not letting life live you. So you get to choose what you want to enjoy. Do go out to his Instagram site, The Urban Outsiders. Will provide the backlink to it. As for us, you can find us on our website, outdooradventureseries.com. We're also on LinkedIn and Facebook on our Outdoor Adventure Series pages. And you can also listen to this episode wherever you get your podcasts from, such as Apple Podcast or Spotify or any other podcast directory of your choosing. Now, if you are on our website or Spotify or Apple, please leave us a comment, what you thought of this episode. If you let us know if you're going to share it with your friends or family as well. We love to get feedback from our listeners. Okay, folks, until we meet again, I want you to go out there, have a phenomenal day, and we will see you on a future episode of the Outdoor Adventure Series podcast. Take care now.